A new rule in honor of the Academy Awards show this Sunday. Tonight, I would like to commemorate the moment 50 years ago that transformed the Oscar telecast into what it is today. A 4-hour lecture on how bad most people have it by the people who have it the best. You rail against privilege, but you avail yourself of the greatest privilege of all, to remain clueless. Dave Chappelle lashed out at me last month because I called him out for saying there was more free speech in Saudi Arabia than here. Well, I was right. What he said was stupid. America has many problems, including free speech issues on both left and right, but we're real different than Saudi Arabia. If you don't believe me, try opening a lesbian art gallery there.
So Hollywood is getting ready to pat itself on the back again with the Oscars. And at this point, award season feels less like a celebration of movies and more like a 4-hour group therapy session hosted by people who haven't stood in a normal line for anything since the Bush administration. And look, I like movies. I love movies. Movies are one of the last cultural things that can still bring together people who disagree on basically everything else, which makes it kind of impressive that Hollywood keeps finding new ways to turn entertainment into a lecture, just with better lighting and a live orchestra. And if you're into this kind of breakdown where we call out hypocrisy, clown behavior, and that weird cultish performative energy that makes normal people want to mute the TV, do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell, because you already know the comment section on this one is about to be completely unhinged. Now, the reason this whole conversation is back in the spotlight is Bill Maher. Love him or hate him, Maher's basically taken on the role of saying the thing half of Hollywood agrees with privately, but would never say publicly, because they don't want to get socially body slammed at the next important dinner party. And whether you agree with him or not, the point he keeps making lands harder every single year. Hollywood is addicted to virtue, signaling the way teenagers are addicted to their phones. It's not even about the cause anymore. Pick any cause. It's about the performance of caring, the optics, the accessories, the pins, the ribbons, the color-coded outfits, the carefully worded speeches that sound like they were written by a committee of PR managers who are allergic to risk. It's activism as a fashion statement. Moral posturing as branding. And then they're shocked when regular people roll their eyes so hard they almost pull a muscle, because from the outside it doesn't feel sincere. It feels rehearsed. It feels like everyone is competing for the same gold medal in being seen as correct. Maher's not even pretending this is some shocking revelation. He talks about getting what he calls soft-ankled, not the big, dramatic, trending on Twitter cancellation where everyone screams, a hashtag forms, and someone issues a Notes app apology that starts with, "I want to acknowledge the harm." No, this is a Hollywood version. Quieter, subtler, way more passive-aggressive. Suddenly you get fewer invites. Rooms feel colder. Conversations end faster. People act like they didn't hear you. You're still technically there, but the vibe changes. You're not exiled. You're just tolerated, like background noise. You exist, but only until the check clears. And why did that happen? Not because Maher became some right-wing caricature. Not because he slapped on a MAGA hat or switched teams. But because in modern entertainment culture, questioning progressive orthodoxy, even slightly, is treated like a moral crime. Like you didn't just disagree, you betrayed. Like you showed up to brunch wearing something unspeakable, and now everyone's pretending you don't exist. That's the real sickness here. Not activism, not caring, but the inability to tolerate dissent inside the tribe. The idea that if you don't clap hard enough, fast enough, or in perfect rhythm, you must be dangerous. And that's how you end up in an industry that confuses agreement with virtue and silence with goodness. Hollywood loves to frame itself as brave, rebellious, and countercultural. But the irony is, it's become one of the most conformity-obsessed spaces in America. Same opinions, same talking points, same applause lines, same moral script, just delivered by people who live lives so disconnected from normal reality that it borders on parody. And this is why the lectures don't land. This is why people tune out. Because it's hard to take moral instruction seriously from people who live in gated bubbles, fly private, and treat inconvenience like a human rights violation. The message might be correct. The delivery makes it unbearable. Maher's not saying Hollywood should shut up and make movies. He's saying stop pretending that repeating the approved opinion at the right moment makes you courageous. Stop confusing applause from your peers with impact in the real world. Stop mistaking moral theater for moral authority. Because when entertainment becomes a sermon, people don't feel inspired. They feel talked down to. And once that happens, the message doesn't matter anymore. People stop listening. Not because they disagree, but because they're tired of being lectured by people who will never live with the consequences of the policies they cheer for on stage. And that's the part Hollywood still doesn't get. You can have the best intentions in the world, but if your delivery feels smug, performative, and disconnected, all you're doing is hardening resentment. You're not changing minds. You're just feeding the backlash and then acting confused when it shows up.
Oh, you
I just got a Golden Globe nomination for the one I did.
Oh, really?
That's yesterday.
How often do you get nominated for your specials?
Nothing. I used to get nominated for everything.
Yeah.
And then, the wokeness came in, and then I was considered conservative, which
are you bad?
ridiculous. So I was what I call soft canceled.
Yeah.
Where you don't
Well, I'm a Bill Clinton liberal, which is from the 90s, which is now called a Nazi.
Exactly, right.
Yeah.
You're a white supremacist.
So this is the first time in a while I've been nominated for something.
Okay.
Which I think shows a little bit that we are coming out of the woke.
And this is where it gets genuinely funny, because Ma calls himself a Bill Clinton liberal. And in the 90s, that basically meant moderate Democrat, pro-gay, pro-choice, don't be weird, don't torch the economy, and maybe try not to scare normal people. That was it. That was the whole ideology. In 2026 Hollywood terms, though, congratulations, you're now apparently right-wing extremist adjacent. The Overton window has shifted so far that if you say something as mild as, hey, maybe we shouldn't shame people just for asking questions, someone in a $4,000 outfit is going to lean over and whisper, that's literally violence. And you're just standing there thinking, what are we doing? When did disagreement become harm? When did curiosity become a threat? But here's the twist, and this is the part that exposes the whole game. After years of the soft freeze treatment, Ma suddenly gets nominated again. The same industry that was quietly sidelining him is now like, actually, come back. We love you. Please sit at our table. And you can almost hear the gears turning, because Hollywood doesn't really operate on principles the way normal people mean principles. It operates on vibes, on trends, on what feels safest right now. If the cultural wind shifts even slightly, they'll rediscover someone they were avoiding last season, like at a limited time menu item. No apology, no reflection, just vibes. And Ma basically says the thing a lot of people have been thinking but were afraid to say out loud. Maybe we're coming out of the worst part of the wokeness era. Not because the ideas vanished, not because empathy disappeared, but because people are tired, deeply, spiritually tired. At some point, the average viewer stopped saying, oh, wow, such important messaging, and started saying, can you please just let the superhero punch the villain without giving me a TED talk about microaggressions? Audiences don't hate empathy. They hate being preached at. There's a difference. And Hollywood has been acting like there isn't. People want stories, characters, conflict, resolution. They don't want to feel like they're being graded morally for watching a movie on a Tuesday night after work. They don't want every piece of entertainment to feel like a compliance seminar with better cinematography. And that's the quiet shift Ma is pointing at, not a backlash against compassion, a backlash against moral theater, against the idea that every story has to prove it's on the right side of history, instead of just being honest, human, and good. Hollywood mistook applause from insiders for approval from audiences. And now that audiences are tuning out, box offices are wobbling, and streaming numbers aren't what they used to be, suddenly the rules feel more flexible. Suddenly the guy who was problematic last year is refreshingly honest this year. That's not growth. That's trend chasing with a conscience filter. And the irony is, Ma didn't move that much. The culture sprinted. He stayed roughly where he was, and the labels kept changing around him, which is how you end up in a place where moderation is treated like heresy and common sense sounds rebellious. This is what happens when an industry confuses sensitivity with fragility and disagreement with danger. You don't get progress, you get paralysis. You don't get art, you get messaging. and you definitely don't get trust. So when people say, why does Ma keep harping on this? This is why. He's not mad that people care. He's mad that caring turned into a performance with punishments attached. He's mad that asking questions became suspect. He's mad that nuance got replaced with vibes and fear. And judging by the audience reaction lately, he's not alone.
But, it's not one that the woke can watch and not throw up, because I call their shit out and the fact that people are laughing shows that it's funny. When you do stupid things, it's funny. And the left did a lot more stupid things in the last 5 to 10 years. And I'm a comedian. I go where the gold is. And it's hitting the side of a barn to make fun of some of this shit.
Sure, it's serious.
I mean, if you think, I quoted like very esteemed publications like The Atlantic or saying things like, separating sports by sex doesn't make sense. Well, if that's not of course it does. If anybody can't do 5 minutes on that,
yeah,
or Mr. Beast, who was helping disabled people, and the Washington Post guy was tweeting like, he thinks disability is something that needs to be solved.
Maher's basic idea is that comedy naturally follows whatever is most absurd, and lately the left has been handing comedians endless material. People are doing over-the-top things with total confidence, which makes the job almost too easy. It's like showing up to a pond already full of fish. No special talent required. Just throw in a net and pull jokes out. And the real proof is the audience reaction. When people laugh, it's because the joke connects to something true. What makes it even funnier is how some people completely lose it when they're the target. Instead of brushing it off, they melt down, reacting like children who've just been told no, which only adds another layer of comedy. Maher then lands one of his hardest hits by calling out Hollywood's love for empty symbols. A tragedy happens, a conflict breaks out, or a social issue trends, and suddenly everyone is wearing the right pin, ribbon, bracelet, or color. The message is clear. Look at this accessory and assume this famous person is making a difference. But nothing actually changes. No problem gets solved. And if you question it, people act like you've crossed a moral line. Maher shares a moment where a reporter asked why he wasn't wearing a pin after a police shooting. His answer was simple. It was awful, but he didn't need a pin to prove he cared. He even said that if he'd had more time to think, he'd say the same thing. The joke works because it exposes how strange this ritual has become, as if being a good person is measured by what you wear, like earning virtue points just by putting on the right accessory.
And walking in, some reporter asked me why I wasn't wearing a lapel pin for the first Minneapolis shooting a couple of weeks ago, and I said, well, it was a terrible thing that happened, and it shouldn't have happened, and if they didn't act like such thugs, it wouldn't have had to happen, but I don't need to wear a pin about it. Now, please understand, I had no idea this question was coming, and so tonight I'd like to say that if I had the chance to think about it, my answer would be exactly the same. I hope I didn't spoil the perfect record of pins and ribbons solving all the world's problems.
Maher understands that some people hear this criticism and immediately assume it means indifference. But that's not the point he's making. There's an important difference between genuinely caring about an issue and publicly displaying that concern. Many people care deeply without turning it into a performance. They support causes quietly, help people around them, give their time or money when they can, and stay engaged in their communities. These actions may not be visible to everyone, but they are often the ones that create real impact. He contrasts this with a more public, symbolic approach that is common in celebrity culture. When a serious issue becomes part of the public conversation, there is often a quick response involving visible gestures, such as wearing ribbons, making emotional statements, or posting symbolic images. While these actions can raise awareness, Maher questions whether they lead to meaningful change. His point about pins and ribbons is effective because it highlights a pattern. Many long-standing problems have been associated with awareness symbols for years, yet the underlying issues remain unresolved. What tends to grow instead is the focus on being seen as morally aligned. According to Maher, this behavior is less about solving problems and more about maintaining social approval and avoiding criticism, turning public concern into a form of reputation management rather than meaningful action.
I mean, you can't name a problem from guns to AIDS to bullying to breast cancer that still exists after people wore a ribbon for it. Except all of them. You posers. 3 years ago, everybody was all into Ukrainian flags. What happened to that? Another cause tossed into the junk drawer with yesterday's choke collar? Get out of here with your virtue-signaling body ornaments. They're just crucifixes for liberals.
This is the behavior Maher is pointing to. Much of celebrity activism functions like group behavior rather than independent thought. One person adopts a symbol, and suddenly everyone else feels pressure to follow. In many cases, the gesture seems driven less by understanding and more by a desire to stay aligned with what is currently acceptable. This pattern isn't limited to one political side. Performative politics has become common across the spectrum. Though Maher argues that the entertainment industry has refined into a highly visible routine, that trend connects to a larger issue, declining public trust in celebrities as moral authorities. Celebrities, like anyone else, are entitled to their opinions. They are citizens, they participate in elections, and they are affected by society. The problem arises when there is a large gap between the message being delivered and the life experience of the person delivering it. When someone with extreme wealth and privilege speaks about sacrifice or hardship, it can feel disconnected from the realities of everyday people. As Maher suggests, that disconnect makes the message sound less persuasive and more patronizing, especially to those who live with the real consequences of the policies being discussed.
You know, congratulations for raising awareness, the awareness you really care about, which is how wonderful you are. Ricky Gervais once told the award show crowd, "Don't use it as a platform to make a political speech. You're in no position to lecture the public about anything. You know nothing about the real world." And of course, this is where celebrities say, "How dare you? We're citizens with just as much right to speak out." Agreed. You absolutely do. I'm just saying, don't. It's having the opposite effect of what you want.
Maher then delivers what he sees as a defining observation about celebrity culture. He points out the contradiction of condemning privilege while benefiting from a powerful form of it at the same time, the ability to remain uninformed without facing consequences. In his view, this is the real advantage celebrities often have. It's not just wealth or recognition, but the freedom to be confidently mistaken while living in an environment so insulated that real-world consequences rarely reach them. That distance from everyday reality shapes how their opinions are formed and expressed. This idea carries into Maher's response to a comment made by Dave Chappelle, who suggested that there was more free speech in Saudi Arabia than in the United States. Maher strongly disagrees, arguing that while the U.S. absolutely has problems related to speech, including social pressure, online backlash, institutional biases, and inconsistent enforcement by employers and platforms, those issues are not the same as the absence of fundamental freedoms. Comparing the United States to Saudi Arabia, he argues, ignores basic realities about what speech is actually permitted in different societies. His point is not meant as an exaggeration, but as a reminder of context. Conversations about free speech only make sense when they are grounded in real-world conditions, not abstract comparisons that overlook clear and important differences.
You rail against privilege, but you avail yourself of the greatest privilege of all, to remain clueless. Dave Chappelle lashed out at me last month because I called him out for saying there was more free speech in Saudi Arabia than here. Well, I was right. What he said was stupid. America has many problems, including free speech issues on both left and right, but we're real different than Saudi Arabia. If you don't believe me, try opening a lesbian art gallery there.
Maher's point is that it's entirely fair to criticize the United States while still recognizing that it does not operate under the same level of government control or repression found in some other countries. Acknowledging flaws does not require ignoring basic differences in political systems. He uses this to highlight a broader problem with celebrity commentary. When someone with an enormous platform makes a claim that lacks context or seriousness, it doesn't come across as bold or courageous. Instead, it suggests a disconnect from reality, as if the person is more focused on maintaining a personal narrative than engaging with facts. Over time, this helps explain why audiences stop paying attention. It's not because people reject uncomfortable truths, but because they grow tired of confident statements that don't hold up to scrutiny. Maher then turns his attention to award shows themselves, criticizing how they have shifted in tone and purpose. What once felt like a celebration of standout work increasingly feels like an exercise in self-praise within industry. The focus, he argues, has moved away from recognizing excellence and toward reinforcing shared values and approval among insiders. When award ceremonies introduce categories that seem designed to highlight work that audiences genuinely enjoyed, it suggests a widening gap between industry recognition and public taste. For Maher, this shift reflects a larger issue. Institutions have become so inward-facing that they lose touch with the people they are meant to represent or entertain.
They have to come up with new categories for the awards. The Golden Globes came up with a new one this year that basically picture people liked. They had, they had become such self-congratulating, virtue-signaling bores that they had to go, oh yeah, let's make a category for that. People actually paid to see something great. So there's a new Oscar category.
This helps explain why many viewers gradually lose interest. Audiences are not eager to spend hours listening to speeches that sound more like classroom discussions led by people with enormous wealth and influence. Being lectured about social responsibility by individuals who live far removed from everyday pressures can create a sense of disconnect. The issue is not the message itself, but the contrast between the message and the setting. When calls for humility or awareness come from a highly polished, luxurious stage, the tone can feel out of touch. It becomes less about disagreement and more about a failure to understand the audience's perspective. Maher argues that the deeper cultural effect goes beyond award ceremonies and shows up most clearly in the entertainment itself. According to him, Hollywood became so focused on delivering approved messages that storytelling began to suffer. Some films now feel more instructional than entertaining, with dialogue that sounds formal and scripted rather than natural. Characters often seem designed to express the right views instead of reflecting real personalities. As a result, story and character development take a back seat to messaging, leaving audiences with the impression that the goal is not enjoyment but correction.
A new rule in honor of the Academy Award show this Sunday. Tonight, I would like to commemorate the moment 50 years ago that transformed the Oscar telecast into what it is today. A 4-hour lecture on how bad most people have it by the people who have it the best. I'm constantly amazed when I rewatch movies from only a decade or so ago, and they were made in a way that today would get you burned at the Twitter stake.
Many people react negatively to this approach, not out of hostility, but because their expectations are different. When audiences buy a ticket, they are looking for a story, not a lecture. History shows that powerful storytelling can explore serious ideas without feeling forced or instructional. Some of the most respected films manage to challenge perspectives, raise difficult questions, and encourage reflection while still engaging viewers emotionally. They rely on strong writing, believable characters, and careful storytelling rather than direct messaging. The problem arises when the message starts to dominate the story. When storytelling feels secondary to making a point, audiences sense it immediately. At that stage, viewers don't usually protest loudly. They simply disengage. Interest fades, attendance drops, and confusion follows about why fewer people are showing up. Maher notes the irony that many well-regarded films from even a decade ago would now face criticism for not meeting current standard of language or representation, despite being created by the same broadly progressive industry. What has changed, he argues, is not the people but the environment around them, a climate where creative work is judged through ideological filters, and where fear of backlash discourages risk, nuance, and honest storytelling.
It's complicated. From 2009, to name just one of many I could choose, was made by a who's who of the most blue ribbon certified Hollywood liberals, woke approved and Democratic Party contributing, from the stars to the producers to the director. But it apparently occurred to none of them to have any kind of minority in the cast. You would need a divining rod to find a person of color within 500 feet of this movie set.
When Maher says Hollywood has lost touch with the people it's meant to entertain, he isn't simply complaining for effect. He's pointing to patterns audiences have been signaling for years. Television ratings are down, movie ticket sales are weaker, and more people are waiting for streaming releases or choosing online platforms instead. Many viewers say those platforms feel more grounded and more authentic. When an industry becomes more focused on earning approval from within its own circles than connecting with the public, the audience gradually looks elsewhere. You don't have to agree with every argument, Maher makes to recognize the concern he's raising. His message isn't that people shouldn't care about social issues. It's that caring should be genuine, not performative. He argues against confusing public displays of morality with real moral action, and against turning creative work into a checklist of approved ideas. His view is that art should be valued for its quality and honesty, not for how well it signals or right opinions. If Hollywood wants to regain broader relevance, he suggests it needs to change its approach. Less lecturing, more listening. That idea leads to a question many people are already debating. Is the industry truly shifting away from this phase, or simply reshaping it under a new label? And more personally, when was the last time you watched a movie that entertained you without feeling like it was trying to instruct you? Those are the questions audiences are increasingly asking as they decide what to watch next.